Hello. Today we're talking about the power of Upsert and external IDs, Salesforce data integration techniques. First and foremost, Salesforce reminds you to make all purchasing decisions based on currently available features. Thankfully, today everything I'm going to teach you are already available on the platform. My name is Doug Ayers. I'm a Salesforce MVP, Senior Developer with Gears CRM, and the Nashville Developer Group Leader. I hold multiple certifications, and I write about Salesforce solutions I'm working on my website at douglascayers.com, and you can also find me on Twitter at douglascayers. A little bit about Gears. We're a gold Salesforce partner. We have over 60 employees, all working remotely, and we've delivered over 400 projects. Our specialty is communities and Service Cloud, as well as doing data integrations. Our agenda. We're going to go over what is data integration, talk through a traditional approach, and then we'll introduce the concept of Upsert and external IDs and the gaps that fills. Then we'll demo that concept by doing something practical, like populating sandbox with data. We'll go over best practices to the Upsert approach, and then how this fits in with a master data management strategy. External data. What is this? This is when we're using Salesforce as our system of engagement, but not necessarily our system of record. The data that we are importing into Salesforce originates somewhere else. Perhaps these are orders and customers from our ERP system, a legacy database, or perhaps leads from a trade show. When we're loading data in this fashion, we're usually not doing it once and we're done. Your company may want to load this data maybe weekly or daily to get refreshed updates into the system. So in this scenario, two big questions arise. One, how do we prevent duplicates? How do we know that second time around whether we've already loaded this account or not so that we don't insert it again? And how do we link records? For example, how do we establish that efficiently certain contacts should be loaded to which accounts or line items to their opportunities? In the traditional approach, or at least how I started, I would have my CSV file of data I needed to load, but then I'm stuck asking this question. How do I know if I've loaded these records before? How can I apply updates if I don't know what their Salesforce ID is? So I did the only thing I knew. I exported the accounts from Salesforce, and then with both spreadsheets, I did a VLOOKUP cross-reference on some common values between them. For example, maybe matching on an account number field, or maybe by name and address. For the rows that matched, I then knew what their Salesforce ID was, so I could update those records. For the rows that did not match, I assumed those were new, and then I inserted them. When I got around to loading the contacts, in the file, of course, I did not have what the Salesforce account ID was in my file. I still had the account numbers, or maybe just the account names and addresses. But Salesforce, using the insert or update operation, expects me to know what that Salesforce account ID is. So I'm back to the drawing board, and I'm exporting all of those accounts out of Salesforce, doing a VLOOKUP in my file just to determine what the account IDs are. Then, when it's time for me to load the contacts to Salesforce, I still need to know whether or not any of them already exist. So I go back and I export all the contacts from Salesforce. And then I do my VLOOKUP cross-reference in my file. And for the rows that match, I now know I can update those contacts. And for the rows that did not match, I insert those contacts. Now, this process simply repeats itself for every other lookup field that I needed to find the Salesforce record ID for. Okay, so this is going to be a problem. This is a lot of spreadsheets to manage. It's a lot of data that I'm having to download and jockey on my computer. And for every lookup field, I'm having to just do this process over and over again. It doesn't feel like it's going to scale. It's just troublesome. There's got to be a better way, right? And what if we made a mistake loading the data? Hopefully we find and fix these mistakes in the sandbox. But if this happens in our production instance, it can have disastrous effects. For example, let's say you're in the healthcare industry. and we load the wrong medications to patients, then the doctors and the healthcare providers are working off bad information. Or perhaps email alerts went out and we have HIPAA violations now because we've sent, wrong patient data to the wrong people. Perhaps you're in the financial services industry and we load the wrong account balances to your customers. Now you have panicked clients calling your help desk. Not a good situation to be in. And then there's the question of how do we fix it? How do we restore all the problems that we just caused? Hopefully you have a good Salesforce backup and restoration tool available. This traditional approach is just tedious, error prone, and it's not going to scale. When we get into the hundreds of thousands and millions of rows, exporting all that data from Salesforce and storing it on our machine and then trying to get Excel to do the VLOOKUPs, it's not practical. It's a lot of wasted time, and it's going to burn through a lot of our API calls. There's got to be a better solution, and there is. The Upsert operation to the rescue. Funny word, so let's level set. The insert operation, as you may be very familiar, always creates new records. It generates a new Salesforce record ID. The update operation makes changes to existing records whose Salesforce ID you know. The upsert operation is a hybrid of the two. It will intelligently insert or update the data based on the existence by matching against an external ID field. Let's walk through this diagram. On the left, we start with our CSV file. Again, this is the data from the external system. It may be coming from an ERP, a legacy database, or perhaps a trade show. Then, using the data loader tool of your choice, we'll do the upsert operation. When Salesforce receives the data, you will have told it what external ID field to use for the matching. Salesforce will then check the object that you're wanting to load into and match the imported file values to that field. If there is no match, then Salesforce will create a new record for you. If there is exactly one match already there, then Salesforce will perform an update instead of creating a duplicate. If there's two or more records in Salesforce that match on this external ID value, then Salesforce is going to kick them out as an error because it's a bit ambiguous which one it should update. Now, I've been talking about this external ID field. What is that? Simply put, it's a custom text or number field with the external ID option enabled. I like to use text fields for this purpose because they can hold up to 255 different letters, numbers, or special characters. There's a lot of flexibility. The value that you want to store in this custom external ID field are the unique record identifiers of the data in the external system that you're loading from. This may be the customer numbers, order numbers, the primary key in the database, whatever makes it unique in that system. And when you mark this field as an external ID, it's going to be imbued with a couple superpowers. First, it's searchable. That means your users can use global search to look up the data. Secondly, it's indexed, which means anywhere you might be filtering by these values, whether it's a list view, a report, or a SQL query, its performance will be improved. Okay, so enough talking about that. Let's get into a practical use case here of populating sandboxes. I like this example for two reasons. One, it very clearly shows how we can load data from an external system, in this case a production org, into another Salesforce instance, in this case a sandbox. And secondly, it's a practical solution that you can use and take home with you today, even if you don't have a sophisticated integration project on the horizon. To get started, we need to do three things. We need to create external ID fields on the objects in our sandbox that we're going to be loading data to. Secondly, we'll export the data from our production org, and we won't have to make any changes to it. And third, we're going to import that production data into our sandbox using the upsert operation, and matching the production ID to the external ID field in the sandbox. Okay. In the next video, I'm going to walk through a demo of using the data loader with Upsert and external IDs to populate our sandbox. Thanks for watching.